I recognize the member from Simcoe Grey.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise in the House this afternoon to speak to Bill 98, not only as the Parliamentary Assistant to the Municipal Affairs, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, but also as a former Deputy Mayor and Mayor of the town of Collingwood and representative on Simcoe County Council for 8 years. Wow. So we come down to Queen's Park and we get into what I call the urban bubble. So I want to give some context to our discussion, because when we talk about municipalities, we're talking about 444 municipalities across this great province. And when you look at the population distribution, and it's interesting because it kind of corresponds to some of the seating in this House, I'm going to suggest, Madam Speaker, 75% of the population of Ontario lives in probably 15 or less municipalities in the GTA, Niagara, and in the Ottawa region. So that leaves 25% of the population living in over 420 municipalities across the country. And that 25% of our population are the stewards for 80% of Ontario's lands. And when I came down to Queen's Park and introduced myself one day, somebody asked me, "What riding do you represent?" And I said, "I represent Simcoe Grey. That's on the southern shores of Georgian Bay." And the response was, "Oh, you're from the north." And that is not, I might be north of Highway 89, but I am not north by any stretch of the imagination, Madam Speaker. And in fact, in my role as a Parliamentary Assistant to MMH, I had the great opportunity to meet Mayor Cheryl Fort of the township of Hornpain. Hornpain, for those that don't know, is the geographic centre of Ontario. It's 11.5 hours north of us here at Queen's Park by car, probably 13 hours from the border to Niagara, which means you have another 13 hours if you could drive to get to the northernmost boundary of this great province. So that's the north, and that shows the expanse of what we represent in this House. And for 15 years, Madam Speaker, the north, the balance of Ontario outside the GTA was gravely ignored. In fact, I think it was a Liberal who uttered, "The north is a wasteland." And if you look at the area codes they represent across the way, Madam Speaker, 905, 416, 613. And it's a similar distribution to some degree for the NDP as well. They have some in the north. If you want to see the party that represents every single area code across this great province, it's on the government side, Madam Speaker. This government represents the area codes across this great province. And Madam Speaker, if you also look at the financial bandwidth of the 3 levels of government, it's important to know this, because what we are seeing in municipalities, and I know this firsthand, and I know all the municipal councillors and mayors on this side of the House know this very well, that municipalities, if you take all the tax dollars collected from the federal government, the provincial government, and we should note that the provincial government hasn't raised a tax of any type over the last 8 years, and the municipality, and make that one tax dollar, the federal government gets 48 cents, the provincial government gets 44 cents, and the municipalities get 8 cents. And we're seeing, particularly since the pandemic, increasing pressures for procurement, whatever level of government you are. Things are becoming unbelievably expensive. There's really no math to explain the costs of procurement for linear infrastructure and for municipal buildings and for convention centres and any type of community facility that a municipality might be looking at. So what we have to look at and this government is doing that, is working with our partners, and municipalities are a statutory construct of the province under the British North America Act, under Section 91 and 92. So we work at the most granular and close level with our municipal partners to make sure that we get them what they need across this province to serve Ontarians. And whether the service comes from the municipal government or the province, many aspects of what municipalities deliver flow through funding. So we need to continue to operate those programs. And this government, since taking office, has increased its funding for our municipal partners by 40%. 40% in 8 years, whether that's through OSIF, the community infrastructure plans, our infrastructure programs for water and wastewater, for health and safety, for roads and bridges. Those have all increased in the last 8 years. And that's how a collaborative government works. That's how you work with your municipal partners to get the services delivered on the ground. And this legislation is part of that evolution, Madam Speaker. This legislation is part of our concerted effort to work with our municipal partners in all municipalities, all 444 municipalities, to make sure to tool them to deliver what they need. And efficiencies is a big part of that. When you're getting 8 cents on the dollar to invest in your community, to provide infrastructure, road maintenance, community programs, these are things that you need assistance with. And so planning is a key part of that process. Getting homes built is a large part of what's motivating this legislation. But the economies and the efficiencies is also a huge part. You can't do one in a vacuum. It's all interconnected. And it is also an iterative process. This legislation is part of this government's track record of doing these things along the way in pieces to attack parts of the problem. And when I hear from across the way there's no consultation, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, I've sat in MOU meetings where this has been addressed. I've sat down with the Ontario Planners Institute to talk about official plans, to talk about site plan development, to talk about planning processes. And let's be very clear, the official plan is just the framework. The municipality enacts the bylaws that put that framework into operation. So we're not kneecapping or restricting the municipalities. What we're telling them is official plans have to be scoped so they can be done quickly. And I can tell you from my experience, both at the municipality and the county, our official plan amendments or reviews should be done every 10 years. And it takes often 8 to 10 years at the upper level planning for a two-tier government like my own to get an official plan amendment passed. So I sat on council when we were talking about official plan amendments that were 8 years old. They had 2 years left in their life cycle to enact all the bylaws underneath them to implement them. That is major slippage. It doesn't help anybody. And caught in the middle of all that are our residents and the developers that are trying to build the much-needed homes. And if you can't get traction on those official plan amendments, then you've got a major problem, and we're seeing that today. 15 years of inaction from across the way where they didn't represent most of the municipalities in Ontario, and here we are. But I want to spend the rest of my time talking about municipal service delivery corporations. Let's be very clear. All of our municipal and provincial public assets are owned by the taxpayer. This is not a change in ownership. This is a change in control and operation. And if you're a municipal government and you're having to charge DCs to support your new linear infrastructure, and you're having to asset management plan because any kind of grant application in this province requires a municipality to have an asset management plan, which requires probably 10%. You to have 10% in reserve for the total value of your assets. And if you have hundreds of millions of dollars of assets, you're going to be sitting on, depending on the size of your municipality, 20 million to 50 to 100 million in assets, and yet you're going to raise your tax rates. How does the taxpayer understand that? This is a way to take that asset off the table of a municipality. It takes it off their debt load, which under the Municipal Act is 25% of their own source revenues. It takes it off their asset management planning, and it takes it off their need for DCs. So where does it go? It goes to a publicly owned and controlled Municipal Services Corporation, which can enter into long-term financing, which can access financing from large things like pension plans, which are looking for a 40-year slow burn return. And it shifts that cost from the municipality so it can direct it into other things that are more immediate. And this allows us to break the logjam to allow developers to move forward. In the county of Simcoe Grey, where I'm from, or county of Simcoe, there are 76 distinct water treatment facilities and over 55 wastewater facilities. And they're all owned, controlled and operated by each municipality that is only worried about supplying what they can to their own residents. And in my town of Collingwood, we draw our water from Georgian Bay, and when I was there, we ran out of water. We had an interim control bylaw which stalled all development. No building permits were issued except with exemption by council. This is the type of issue we're trying to combat. We know we have a $200 billion infrastructure deficit across the province. We're not going to get there by handing out tens of millions of dollars to the municipalities. We have to change the delivery facility. We have to open up bandwidth for the municipalities. We have to control the costs that will be borne as a ratepayer based, just like our LDCs. And we have to move forward to allow shovels to get in the ground through planning processes and having the infrastructure available. And that is why I support Bill 98, Madam Speaker, and I'm proud to be speaking to the House today.